So you say you can't pay your rent? The giant alien woman warned the human foreigner. Leo Mercer stared at the notification hovering in the air before him, its red glow casting an accusatory light across his small habitation module. 2 months behind on rent. The numbers didn't lie, and neither would Sharavesh, the imposing alien woman who owned half the residential units on Astra 7. Damn it, he muttered, swiping the holographic reminder away. It disappeared, but the problem remained. 1 year on this space station, and Leo was still struggling to find his footing. Earth had become too crowded, too regulated, and the promise of opportunity on the frontier had lured him here with dreams that had yet to materialize. His job at the station's maintenance division barely covered his expenses, and after an unexpected medical bill last month, his finances had spiraled. The habitation module was small but functional. A sleeping alcove, a compact kitchenette, and a living area that doubled as his workspace. Through the viewport, the vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, occasionally interrupted by passing ships. It was nothing like the rolling hills of Montana where he'd grown up, but it had become home. His comm unit chimed, and Leo's stomach dropped when he saw the caller ID, Sharavesh, the system announced in its neutral tone. Leo considered ignoring it, but that would only delay the inevitable. Taking a deep breath, he accepted the call. Mr. Mercer. Her voice was deep and melodic, with an accent that made standard English sound exotic. I trust you're well this evening. Ms. Vesh, Leo replied, trying to sound casual. What can I do for you? I believe you know the answer to that question. There was something different in her tone, not the stern businesswoman he'd encountered during their few previous interactions. Are you at your residence currently? Leo glanced around his messy module. Yes, but... Excellent. I'll be there shortly. We have matters to discuss. The call ended before he could protest. Leo ran his hands through his dark hair, looking frantically around the cluttered space. He had 15 minutes, maybe less, before the most intimidating landlord in the sector would be at his door. He managed to clear the worst of the mess, tossing dirty clothes into a storage compartment and organizing the scattered data pads on his desk. He was straightening his shirt when the door chime sounded. Taking a deep breath, Leo pressed the entry panel. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing Sharavesh in all her towering glory. At nearly 2.5 meters tall, she had to duck slightly to enter human-sized doorways. Her skin shimmered with iridescent blues and violets that seemed to shift with her movements. Long, silvery white hair was pulled back in an elaborate braid that reached her waist. Her luminous blue eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his mouth go dry. As always, she wore her signature dark blue jumpsuit with metallic accents that hugged her distinctly feminine curves. Despite being alien, there was something undeniably attractive about her, a fact that Leo had noticed but tried to ignore during their previous encounters. Mr. Mercer, she said, her voice lower and more intimate than it had been over the comm. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the door sliding shut behind her. Miss Vesh, about the rent, I can explain. Leo began, backing up as she approached. His back hit the wall, and still she came closer. I've heard many explanations over the years, she said, reaching out to grasp his wrist. Her touch was warm, her grip firm but not painful. Few of them interesting. Leo's pulse quickened as she leaned down, bringing her face closer to his. The scent of her was alien but pleasant, something like cinnamon and ozone. So, she said, her voice almost a purr. You can't afford to pay your rent. I'm warning you. I won't be leaving here empty-handed. Leo swallowed hard, confusion and an unexpected flicker of interest warring within him. He'd heard rumors among the station's residents, whispers about the alien women's fascination with human men, but had dismissed them as the kind of tall tales that flourished in frontier outposts. Now, with Shara's intense gaze fixed on him, those rumors suddenly seemed less far-fetched. I can work something out, he managed, nodding toward the small seating area. Would you like to sit down? A smile curved her full lips, revealing teeth that were just slightly sharper than human. Yeah, she said, finally releasing his wrist. I believe we can come to an arrangement that will be mutually beneficial. As she moved to the couch, Leo noticed the graceful sway of her hips, the confident set of her shoulders. This was not the stern businesswoman who had rented him the module a year ago. This was something else entirely. "Drink?" he offered, desperate for something to do with his hands. "Please," she replied, settling onto his couch, which suddenly seemed much smaller with her occupying it. As Leo fumbled with glasses and a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion, he couldn't help but wonder what exactly she had in mind for settling his debt, and why the prospect made his heart race with something other than fear. Leo's hands trembled slightly as he poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into each glass. The whiskey had cost him a week's wages, a luxury he'd rarely indulged in since arriving on Astra 7. He handed one to Shara, careful not to spill as their fingers brushed. "Earth whiskey," she noted, bringing the glass to her nose. "Expensive for a man who can't pay his rent?" Leo winced. It was a gift from a friend back home. "A gift you've been saving." She took a small sip, her luminous eyes never leaving his face. "For what occasion, I wonder?" "I hadn't decided yet." Leo settled into the chair across from her, maintaining a safe distance from the couch. "Look, about the rent. I've been watching you, Leo Mercer," Shara interrupted, setting her glass down with deliberate precision. "For quite some time now." The statement caught him off guard. "Watching me? You're the only human in this section of the station. Did you think you wouldn't stand out?" Her lips curved into a smile. "Especially to someone like me." Leo shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at." Shara leaned forward, her silvery hair cascading over one shoulder. "There are stories about human men, you know. Stories that have circulated among my people for generations." "Huh. What kind of stories?" Leo asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Stories of passion, of physical compatibility." Her voice dropped lower. "Of stamina and creativity that surpass most species in the known galaxy." Heat crept up Leo's neck. "Those are just rumors." "Are they?" Shara's gaze was intense, almost predatory. "I've always been curious about the truth behind such tales. Scientific curiosity, you might say." Leo took a large swallow of whiskey, welcoming the burn. "And what does this have to do with my rent situation?" "I have a proposition for you, Leo." Shara stood, her tall frame dominating the small living area as she moved toward him. "I'm willing to forgive your current debt, and perhaps even reduce your future payments in exchange for your services." "My services?" Leo repeated, his mouth suddenly dry despite the whiskey. "As my cultural consultant." She stopped directly in front of his chair, looking down at him. "I want to understand humans better. Their customs, their behaviors, their intimate practices." The implication hung in the air between them. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs as he processed what she was suggesting. "You want me to—" He couldn't quite bring himself to finish the sentence. "I want you to spend time with me," Shara clarified, though her tone made it clear what kind of time she meant. "In my private quarters, teaching me about humans in ways that no textbook or data file could." Leo stood, needing to feel less vulnerable than he did sitting beneath her towering height. Even standing, he only came up to her collarbone. "Why me?" he asked. "Well, there are other humans on Astra 7. None that interest me as you do." She reached out, tracing a finger along his jawline. Her touch sent an electric current through him. "You have a fire in you, Leo Mercer. He sensed it the moment you signed the lease. A determination, a resilience that is uniquely human." Leo caught her wrist, surprising both of them with his boldness. "And if I refuse, then you have 2 days to pay your outstanding balance or find new accommodations." Her expression remained unreadable. Business is business, after all. They stood frozen for a moment, her wrist in his grip, their bodies close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her alien skin. Leo was acutely aware of the power imbalance between them, not just physically, but in their positions on the station. Yet something in her eyes told him this wasn't about power. It was about curiosity, desire, and perhaps something more. "What exactly would this arrangement entail?" he asked finally, releasing her wrist. Shara's smile returned, triumphant yet somehow gentle. "You would come to my quarters 3 evenings each week. We would dine together, talk, and explore our mutual interests. For how long? Until my curiosity is satisfied, or yours wanes." She reached for her glass and finished her whiskey in one graceful motion. "I assure you, Leo, I can be a very generous—" Landlord. The way she said the word made it clear she was offering to be much more than that. Leo's mind raced, weighing his options. He could barely afford his current rent, let alone find a new place on short notice. And despite his initial shock, he couldn't deny the attraction he felt toward this powerful, exotic woman. "I accept," he heard himself say, the words escaping before he'd fully processed his decision. Shara's eyes lit up with pleasure and something that looked remarkably like relief. "Excellent. We begin tomorrow evening. My quarters, 7th level, Section A, 8 o'clock. She moved toward the door, then paused and turned back. "Wear something nice, Leo. This will be a night to remember." As the door slid shut behind her, Leo collapsed back into his chair, his heart racing and his mind filled with equal parts anticipation and trepidation about what he'd just agreed to. The news spread through Astra 7 like a solar flare, fast, bright, and impossible to ignore. "Did you hear about the human Vesh?" The whispers followed Leo through the maintenance corridors the next morning. Alien faces turned to watch him pass, expressions ranging from curiosity to envy to disapproval. Leo kept his head down, focusing on the repair list on his datapad. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying his conversation with Shara, imagining what awaited him that evening. Now it seemed the entire station knew about their arrangement, or at least some version of it. "Mercer!" a gruff voice called from behind. Leo turned to find Drav, his Astralian supervisor, lumbering toward him. The stocky, four-armed alien looked particularly agitated, his facial ridges flushed a deep orange. "Sir?" Leo straightened, bracing for a reprimand. "My office, now." Drav stomped away without waiting for a response. In the cramped maintenance office, Drav settled his bulk behind a desk cluttered with spare parts and schematics. "So," he began, folding his lower set of arms across his chest, "you've caught the attention of Shara Vesh." Leo shifted uncomfortably. "I don't see how that's relevant to my work, sir." "Everything on this station is relevant to everything else, boy." Drav leaned forward, "especially when it involves the station's largest property owner and one of my technicians. It's a private matter." "Nothing's private on Astra 7. Drav's expression softened slightly. "Look, I'm not here to judge your arrangement, but you should know what you're getting into." Leo raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" "The Vesh family has controlled the station for 3 generations. They've got their tentacles in every business, every council decision." Drav lowered his voice. "And Shara, she's not known for long-term attachments, especially with non-Australians." "I appreciate the concern," Leo said stiffly, "but I can handle myself." Drav made a sound somewhere between a snort and a laugh. "Humans, always so confident." He waved one of his upper hands dismissively. "Just watch yourself, and for stars' sake, don't be late for your shift tomorrow." The rest of Leo's workday passed in a blur of repairs and sidelong glances. By the time he returned to his module to prepare for the evening, his nerves were frayed. He showered, shaved, and put on his best clothes. A dark blue shirt and black pants that had rarely left his storage unit since he'd arrived on the station. See, at precisely 7:55, Leo stood outside Shara's quarters on the 7th level. The door was twice the size of his own, with intricate patterns etched into its metallic surface. He took a deep breath and pressed the entry request panel. The door slid open silently, revealing a space that made Leo's jaw drop. While his module was utilitarian and cramped, Shara's quarters were expansive and luxurious. The ceiling soared at least 5 meters high, accommodating her tall frame. One entire wall was a viewport looking out into space, currently showing a breathtaking view of a nearby nebula. The decor was a fascinating blend of alien aesthetics and human artifacts. Sleek, curved furniture designed for Astralian physiology sat alongside Earth antiques. A wooden bookshelf filled with actual paper books, a vintage record player, even a classical guitar mounted on one wall. "You approve?" Shara's voice came from behind him. Leo turned to find her emerging from what appeared to be a bedroom. She'd traded her usual jumpsuit for a flowing garment of shimmering fabric that accentuated her height and the graceful lines of her body. Her silvery hair hung loose around her shoulders. "It's not what I expected," Leo admitted, suddenly feeling underdressed. "I've always been fascinated by human culture." She gestured toward the collection. "Your species creates such beautiful things despite your brief lives. We try to make the most of the time we have, Leo said, following her further into the room. A philosophy I admire. Shara moved to a small bar area and poured 2 glasses of a luminescent blue liquid. Though my people live nearly 3 times as long as humans, few of us accomplish half as much. She handed him a glass, her fingers lingering against his. To cultural exchange, she said, raising her drink. To cultural exchange, Leo echoed, taking a cautious sip. The liquid tasted like honey and starlight, warming him from the inside out. I've prepared dinner, Shara said, guiding him toward a table set with elegant dishware. I researched human dietary requirements and preferences. The meal was exquisite. Dishes that resembled Earth cuisine, but with subtle alien variations that delighted Leo's palate. Throughout dinner, they talked about their worlds, their families, their journeys to Astra 7. Leo found himself relaxing, drawn in by Shara's genuine interest in his life and experiences. People are talking about us, Leo said finally, as they finished their meal. About this arrangement. Does that bother you? Shara asked, studying him over the rim of her glass. I'm more concerned about how it affects you, your reputation. She laughed, a melodic sound that filled the room. My dear Leo, I own half this station. I can afford to do as I please. Her expression grew more serious. But your concern is touching. As they moved to a seating area near the viewport, Shara sat close to him on a couch designed for her species, making Leo acutely aware of their size difference and the heat of her body next to his. Now, she said, her voice dropping to that purring tone that sent shivers down his spine. Shall we begin our first lesson in human customs? Leo's heart raced as she leaned closer. What would you like to know? Everything, she whispered, her luminous eyes capturing his. But perhaps we should start with how humans show affection. Leo reached up, gently touching her face, tracing the elegant line of her pointed ear. Her skin was softer than he'd imagined, warm and slightly textured like fine suede. It begins with touch, he said softly, learning each other's bodies. Shara's breath caught as his fingers trailed down her neck. And then we follow where that touch leads us. What followed was a dance of discovery, human and alien exploring unfamiliar territory with increasing boldness. Their differences became points of fascination rather than obstacles, each new sensation a revelation. Leo found himself swept away by the intensity of their connection, all thoughts of their business arrangement forgotten in the heat of the moment. Later, as they lay entwined in her bedroom, Shara traced patterns on his chest with a slender finger. The rumors, she murmured, did not do your species justice. Leo laughed softly, feeling a ridiculous surge of pride for humanity. Glad to uphold the reputation of my people. This arrangement, she said, propping herself up to look at him, I think it will be most educational. As Leo gazed up at her, this powerful, fascinating alien who had chosen him of all people, he couldn't help but agree. Whatever came next, he was certain of one thing. Life on Astra 7 had just gotten a lot more interesting. Over the next 2 weeks, Leo fell into a new routine. By day, he worked his maintenance shifts, ignoring the knowing looks and whispers that followed him through the station. 3 nights a week, he visited Shara's quarters, where they shared meals, conversations, and increasingly passionate encounters. Leo found himself looking forward to these evenings more than he cared to admit. What had begun as a business arrangement was evolving into something deeper, at least for him. Shara was intelligent, curious, and surprisingly funny once she let her guard down. Their physical compatibility was undeniable, each encounter more intense than the last as they learned each other's bodies. On this particular evening, Leo arrived at her quarters to find Shara engaged in a heated conversation with another Australian female. They spoke in their native language, a melodic flow of sounds that Leo's translator implant couldn't fully process. Both women turned as the door closed behind him. The stranger was slightly shorter than Shara, but shared the same iridescent skin and elegant features. Her hair was a deeper silver, almost metallic, and cut in a severe style that accentuated her sharp cheekbones. Leo, Shara said, switching to English, this is Nera, my cousin. Nera's gaze traveled over Leo with undisguised interest. So this is your human, she said, her accent thicker than Shara's. He's smaller than I expected. Leo bristled at being discussed like a specimen. I'm average height for my species. And yet you've made quite an impression on my cousin. Nera circled him slowly. She speaks of little else these days. Shara shot her cousin a warning look. Nera was just leaving. Actually, Nera said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, I thought I might join you for dinner. I'm curious about these cultural consultations. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Leo glanced at Shara, whose expression had become unreadable. That would be lovely, Shara said finally, her tone carefully neutral. Leo, would you mind? Mind? Of course he minded, but he couldn't exactly say so without sounding possessive of a relationship that was, officially at least, just a business arrangement. Not at all, he lied. The more, the merrier. Dinner was an exercise in restraint. Nera peppered Leo with questions about Earth, human physiology, and his services to Shara, each inquiry laced with innuendo. Shara remained unusually quiet, intervening only when her cousin's questions became too pointed. So, Nera said as they finished their meal, when will you be taking another consultant, Shara? The gathering is only a month away. Leo nearly choked on his drink. Another consultant? Shara's skin darkened slightly, the Australian equivalent of a blush. I hadn't planned to discuss this yet. Discuss what? Leo set down his glass, a knot forming in his stomach. Nera looked between them with evident delight. Oh my, you haven't told him about Australian bonding customs? Nera, enough! Shara's voice held a warning, but Leo's curiosity was piqued. What customs? Nera leaned forward eagerly. Australians traditionally take multiple partners. For the gathering, our most sacred ceremony, a minimum of 3 partners is required for the ritual bonding. Leo felt as though the artificial gravity had suddenly increased. 3 partners. It's not what you think, Shara interjected quickly. The gathering is a spiritual and social event, not just a physical one, and participation is entirely optional. For commoners, perhaps, Nera said, but for the head of the Vesh family, your attendance is expected. The council would view your absence as an insult. Leo pushed back from the table, needing space. So this whole time, you've been planning to bring someone else into whatever this is between us? No, Shara said firmly. I've made no such plans. Yet, Nera added with a smirk. Shara stood abruptly, her height imposing even in the spacious room. I think it's time for you to leave, Nera. Her cousin rose gracefully, apparently unperturbed by the dismissal. Of course, I've said too much. She paused at the door, looking back at Leo. Humans are so charmingly possessive, aren't they? Almost like Terran canines marking their territory. After Nera's departure, a heavy silence fell between Leo and Shara. He paced near the viewport, trying to process this new information, while she watched him warily from across the room. Were you going to tell me? He finally asked. Eventually, yes. Shara moved closer, though she maintained a respectful distance. But our arrangement is still new. I didn't want to overwhelm you with cultural differences. Cultural differences? Leo laughed without humor. That's one way to put it. Leo, her voice softened. My people's customs may seem strange to you, but they're deeply ingrained in our society. The gathering happens once every 5 years. It's a celebration of connection, not just a physical intimacy. And you need 3 partners for this celebration? Traditionally, yes, but I'm not bound by tradition in all things. She reached for his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he let her take it. What we have is between us, no one else. Leo wanted to believe her, but Nera's words had planted seeds of doubt. Have there been others? Other consultants before me? Shara's hesitation told him everything. There have been companions, yes, none human, none that mattered as you do. The admission that he mattered should have been reassuring, but Leo couldn't shake the feeling that he was just the latest in a series of exotic experiences for her. I should go, he said, pulling his hand away. I need to think. Leo, please. For the first time since he'd known her, Shara looked vulnerable. Don't let Nera's interference come between us. Us? Leo shook his head. I'm not even sure what us means anymore. As he moved toward the door, Shara called after him. Will you return for our next consultation? Leo paused, conflicted. Despite his anger and confusion, the thought of not seeing her again created an ache in his chest he hadn't anticipated. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I need time." As the door closed behind him, Leo wondered if he'd been naive to think their arrangement could ever be more than a transaction, a human novelty for an alien collector. Yet the look in Shara's eyes as he left suggested there was more at stake than either of them had initially bargained for. Leo arrived at his maintenance shift the next morning to find his access card denied. The security panel flashed red, its automated voice coolly informing him that his credentials had been suspended. "What the hell?" he muttered, trying again with the same result. "Problem, Mercer." Trav appeared behind him, all four arms loaded with equipment. "My card's not working." The Aurelian's facial ridges darkened. "Yeah, about that. Got orders from station administration this morning. You've been reassigned." "Reassigned to where?" "Waste Reclamation, Level 12, Section F." Trav shifted uncomfortably. "Look, I tried to fight it. You're one of my best techs, but the order came from high up." Level 12 was the lowest habitable deck on Astra 7, home to the station's least desirable functions: waste processing, industrial recycling, and maintenance for the external hull mechanisms. Section F was notorious for its harsh conditions and high turnover rate. "This is bullshit," Leo said, anger rising. "Who authorized this?" "Administrator Neravesh." Drav handed him a new access card, effective immediately. Nera. Of course. Leo's mind raced back to the previous evening, her smug expression as she'd revealed Australian bonding customs, the calculated way she'd driven a wedge between him and Shara. "This isn't a coincidence," Leo said. "She's Shara's cousin." "Politics." Drav shook his head. "I warned you about getting involved with the Vesh family. They've been feuding amongst themselves since the old man died." "What do you mean?" Drav glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Rumor has it Nera expected to inherit the family business. Instead, everything went to Shara. Been bad blood ever since?" Leo considered his options. He could contact Shara, ask her to intervene, but his pride rebelled at the thought. This was exactly what Nera wanted, to make him appear weak, dependent on Shara's protection. "I'll handle it," he said finally. "Thanks for the heads up." Level 12 was every bit as unpleasant as its reputation suggested. The air was thick with moisture and the acrid smell of industrial cleaners. The lighting was dim, casting everything in a sickly green glow. The other workers, mostly non-Australians from various species, gave Leo curious glances as he reported to his new supervisor. Grell, a hunched, amphibious alien with mottled skin, looked up from his console with obvious surprise. "A human in waste reclamation? That's new." "Not my choice," Leo said, handing over his reassignment order. Grell's bulbous eyes widened as he read. "Direct order from Administrator Neravesh herself. You must have really pissed someone off, human." "Something like that." "Well, we're short-handed, so I won't complain." Grell tossed him a protective suit. "Suit up. You're on filtration duty." The work was grueling and disgusting. By midday, Leo was covered in sweat and substances he preferred not to identify. His muscles ached from hauling heavy filter components, and the suit's ventilation system was barely keeping up with the noxious fumes. During his break, he checked his personal comm unit, hoping for a message from Shara. Nothing. Either she hadn't heard about his reassignment, or she was choosing not to intervene. Neither option made him feel better. As he was returning to his station, a notification appeared on his comm. Rent increase, effective immediately. The attached document showed his monthly rent had tripled, far exceeding his new reduced salary. "Son of a bitch," Leo muttered. Nera was systematically dismantling his life on Astra 7. Without his maintenance job and with rent he couldn't possibly afford, he'd be forced to leave the station and Shara behind. By the end of his shift, Leo had formulated a plan. He wouldn't run, and he wouldn't go begging to Shara. He'd fight back the human way, with ingenuity and determination. His first stop was the station's public records terminal. As a resident, he had access to basic information about Astra 7's administration and business operations. He spent hours digging through property records, council minutes, and financial disclosures, anything that might give him leverage against Nera. What he found was interesting, if not immediately useful. The Vesh family's holdings were vast and complex, with subsidiaries, and shell companies extending throughout the sector. Shara's father had indeed left everything to her, bypassing Nira despite her senior position in the family business. More intriguing were the recent transactions. Since taking control, Shara had been quietly restructuring the business, consolidating power, and cutting out several ventures that Nira had personally overseen. No wonder her cousin was resentful. Leo was so absorbed in his research that he almost missed the message that flashed on his comm unit. Meet me, Docking Bay 7, 2,200 hours. No sender identification, but Leo had a strong suspicion who it was from. He glanced at the time. He had 30 minutes to make it to the docking bay on the other side of the station. Docking Bay 7 was reserved for private vessels, primarily the luxury ships of wealthy visitors and residents. At this hour, it was deserted except for a sleek silver craft berthed in the far corner. As Leo approached, its entry ramp lowered silently. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come," Shara said from within the ship's dimly lit interior. Leo paused at the foot of the ramp. "I almost didn't. Please," she gestured for him to enter. "We need to talk, and I'd rather not do it where my cousin's surveillance might reach." The ship's interior was as luxurious as Shara's quarters, designed for comfort rather than utility. Leo remained standing as the entry ramp closed behind him, sealing them in privacy. "You know what she's done," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I know." Shara's expression was troubled. "The reassignment, the rent increase. She's trying to force you off the station." "Why? Because of us?" "Partly." Shara moved closer, her height even more imposing in the confined space. "But it's more complicated than that. Nira has been maneuvering against me since my father died. You're just her latest weapon. So I'm collateral damage in your family feud?" Leo's anger, simmering all day, threatened to boil over. "Were you ever going to tell me about the inheritance dispute? Or about your people's bonding customs? Or was I just a convenient distraction?" "No." Shara's denial was vehement. "What's between us has nothing to do with family politics. I should have been more forthcoming, yes, but I never intended to deceive you." She reached for him, and despite his anger, Leo didn't pull away. Her touch was gentle, her luminous eyes searching his face. "I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you," she said softly, "human or Australian. That's why Nira sees you as a threat, not just to her ambitions, but to our traditions." The sincerity in her voice was difficult to doubt. Leo felt his resolve weakening, the connection between them as powerful as ever despite the complications. "I can fix this," Shara continued. "Reverse the reassignment, cancel the rent increase. But Nira won't stop there. She'll find other ways to come between us." "Then we fight back," Leo said, his natural human determination asserting itself. "Together." Shara's smile was both relieved and predatory. "Together," she agreed, pulling him closer. "Starting now." What followed was a reunion of bodies and spirits, more intense for their brief separation and the challenges they now faced as a united front. In the privacy of her ship, they reaffirmed their connection, human and alien finding common ground in the universal language of desire. Later, as they lay entwined in the ship's sleeping quarters, Shara traced the contours of Leo's face with a gentle finger. "Nira doesn't understand what she's up against," she murmured. "She's never encountered human stubbornness before." Leo smiled, feeling a surge of pride, not just for himself, but for his species. "She's about to get a crash course." "You want to do what?" Leo stared at Shara across the breakfast table in her quarters. 3 days had passed since their reconciliation on her ship, days spent strategizing their response to Nira's machinations. Shara had already reversed Leo's job reassignment and canceled the rent increase, using her authority as head of the Vesh family. But they both knew these were temporary victories. Nira would find other ways to attack their relationship unless they took decisive action. "I want to publicly acknowledge our relationship," Shara repeated calmly, sipping her morning beverage, a steaming purple liquid that smelled like cinnamon and ozone, "and announce my intention to attend the gathering with you as my sole partner." Leo set down his coffee. "Won't that cause a scandal? You said the gathering requires 3 partners minimum." "It will cause more than a scandal," Shara admitted. "It will be seen as a direct challenge to centuries of Australian tradition. No family leader has ever attended with fewer than 3 partners, let alone with a non-Australian. Then why do it? Why not just ignore the gathering altogether? Shara's luminous eyes fixed on him with intensity. Because as long as we hide, Nira has power over us. She can paint our relationship as something shameful, something I'm unwilling to defend publicly. She reached across the table, her slender blue fingers entwining with his. And because I'm tired of pretending what we have is merely a business arrangement or a cultural curiosity, it's more than that, at least for me. Leo squeezed her hand, warmth spreading through his chest. For me too. Then we face this together, openly. The announcement came that afternoon, broadcast throughout Astra 7 on all public channels. Shara, resplendent in formal Australian attire, a flowing silver gown that accentuated her height and the elegant lines of her body, stood before the station's council chamber. Leo stood beside her, wearing the finest clothes he owned, feeling both proud and slightly terrified. As head of the Vesh family and primary stakeholder in Astra 7's operations, Shara began, her voice clear and confident, I wish to formally announce my intention to attend the upcoming gathering with Leo Mercer of Earth as my exclusive bonding partner. A murmur swept through the assembled council members, a mix of Australians and representatives from other species with significant presence on the station. Several of the older Australians looked openly shocked. This decision, Shara continued, reflects both my personal choice and my belief that Astra 7 must evolve beyond rigid traditions to embrace the diversity of cultures that make our station a thriving hub of interstellar commerce and cooperation. From his position slightly behind Shara, Leo could see Nira's face darkening with rage. She sat among the council members, her posture rigid, her metallic hair gleaming under the chamber's lights. This is outrageous, Nira stood abruptly. The gathering is our most sacred tradition. To attend with a single partner, a human no less, makes a mockery of our heritage. Traditions evolve, Shara replied calmly. As do societies. Humans have been valuable contributors to Astra 7 since its founding. Their adaptability, resourcefulness, and passion are qualities our own people would do well to embrace. Another council member, an elderly Australian male with pale blue skin, rose slowly. Administrator Vesh, while I respect your authority as head of your family, this announcement raises serious concerns. The gathering is not merely a social occasion, but a cornerstone of our cultural identity. I understand your concerns, Elder Toril. Shara inclined her head respectfully. But I ask you, what is the true purpose of the gathering? Is it not to celebrate connection, to strengthen bonds between individuals? That is precisely what I intend to honor. A genuine bond, not a superficial adherence to numerical requirements. Leo stepped forward, surprising both himself and the council. If I may speak, he asked, looking to Shara, who nodded encouragement. I understand I'm an outsider to your traditions, Leo began, his voice steadier than he felt. But in human history, we found that our greatest advancements came when we questioned old ways of thinking. Not rejecting tradition entirely, but allowing it to grow and adapt. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of various council members. What Shara and I share isn't just physical attraction or curiosity about each other's cultures. It's a connection that transcends species, one based on mutual respect, admiration, and yes, affection. A soft murmur ran through the chamber, not entirely hostile. Leo continued, emboldened. On Earth, we have a saying, the measure of a civilization is how it treats its minorities. By accepting relationships like ours, Astra 7 can demonstrate that it's truly a crossroads of cultures, not just a marketplace where different species conduct business while remaining separate. Nira's laugh cut through the moment. How touching. The human lectures us on civilization while advocating for the dismantling of ours. She turned to the other council members. This is exactly what I warned about. Humans don't assimilate. They expect others to conform to their standards. That's not what Leo began, but Nira spoke over him. I move that the council formally censure Shara Vesh for her disregard of our sacred traditions and unbar her from attending the gathering altogether. The chamber erupted in voices, some supporting Nira's motion, others defending Shara's right to choose her own path. Through the chaos, Leo felt Shara's hand slip into his, a silent affirmation of their unity. Elder Toral raised his hands for silence. This is not a matter to be decided hastily. The gathering is still weeks away. I propose we take time to consider both positions and reconvene in 3 days. As they left the council chamber, Leo and Shara were surrounded by station residents who had watched the broadcast. Some offered support, others stared with undisguised curiosity or disapproval. News of their relationship and Shara's challenge to tradition had spread throughout Astra 7 in minutes. Well, Leo said as they finally reached the privacy of Shara's quarters, that could have gone better. It could have gone worse, Shara countered, sinking onto her couch with uncharacteristic weariness. At least the council didn't immediately side with Nera. Leo sat beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders, a gesture that still felt slightly awkward given their height difference, but had become natural between them. What happens now? Now we wait and prepare. Shara leaned into his embrace. Nera won't stop with the council. She'll try to turn public opinion against us, especially among the Australian community. Let her try, Leo said with the stubborn determination that had become his trademark. If there's one thing humans excel at, it's winning hearts and minds. Shara smiled, some of her energy returning. Is that so? Absolutely, we're naturally charming. He grinned. How do you think I managed to turn my rent problem into this? I believe I was the one who propositioned you, Shara reminded him, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. Details. Leo pulled her closer, marveling at how right it felt to be with her despite their differences. The point is, we're in this together now, publicly. No more hiding. No more hiding, Shara agreed, her voice soft but resolute. Whatever comes next, we face it as partners. As they sealed this promise with a kiss, Leo realized how far they'd come from that first night when she'd appeared at his door demanding payment. What had begun as a transaction had transformed into something neither of them could have anticipated, a bond that now challenged the very foundations of Australian society. And somehow, against all odds, Leo found himself exactly where he wanted to be, standing alongside this remarkable alien woman, ready to fight for their right to be together on their own terms. The message arrived the morning before the council was set to reconvene. It was addressed to Shara, but the contents concerned them both. They're stripping me of my position, Shara said, her voice unnaturally calm as she read the document on her datapad. Effective immediately, unless I renounce our relationship and adhere to traditional protocols for the gathering. Leo took the pad from her hands, scanning the official notice with growing anger. Can they do that? Just take away your inheritance? The Fesh holdings are technically owned by the family trust, not by me personally. Shara moved to the viewport, staring out at the stars. My father named me administrator, but the trust bylaws include provisions for removing a family head who acts against Australian interests. And loving a human qualifies as against Australian interests. Leo couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. According to Nera and her supporters on the council, yes. Shara turned back to him, her luminous eyes dimmed with sadness. She's been planning this since my father died. Our relationship just gave her the leverage she needed. Leo paced the room, his mind racing. There has to be a way to fight this. I could challenge it legally, but the process would take months, possibly years. Shara sank onto the couch. By then, Nera would have consolidated her control over the family assets, including this station. Leo sat beside her, taking her hand in his. What do you want to do? For the first time since he'd known her, Shara looked uncertain. I don't know. My father built this business from nothing. The thought of losing it all, of letting Nera destroy his legacy. She trailed off, then met Leo's gaze directly. But I won't give you up. Not for all the holdings in the sector. The declaration warmed Leo's heart, even as it intensified his determination to find a solution. Then we don't give up. We find another way. He spent the rest of the day in the station's archives, researching Australian customs and the history of the Vesh family. There had to be something they could use, some precedent or loophole that would allow Shara to maintain her position without sacrificing their relationship. It was nearly midnight when he found it. A small notation in an old family document that made him sit up straight, his exhaustion forgotten. Shara! Leo burst into her quarters, waving his datapad. I've got it! She looked up from her own research, her silver hair loose around her shoulders. Got what? A way to honor both your traditions and our relationship. He sat beside her, pulling up the document. Look at this. It's from your great-grandfather's time. Shara studied the text, her brow furrowing. The Vesh Family Compact of 2187. I've never seen this before. It was buried in the family archives. According to this, when your great-grandfather took control of the family, he established a provision for incorporating non-Australians into the family structure through a formal bonding ceremony. That's unusual for that era, Shara said slowly. Apparently, he had a fondness for a Tyrellian traitor, Leo explained. The provision was never used, but it was never repealed either. It's still technically part of your family bylaws. Shara's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. So if we undergo a formal bonding ceremony before the gathering, then I wouldn't be attending as an outsider, but as a member of the Vesh family, Leo finished. The 3-partner minimum wouldn't apply because it's specifically for unbonded attendees. Leo, Shara breathed, her skin shimmering with excitement. This is brilliant. Nera couldn't object without challenging the family compact itself, which would undermine her own claim to authority. There's more, Leo said, unable to suppress his grin. The compact specifically states that a bonded non-Australian partner can serve as co-administrator of family holdings. Shara stared at him for a long moment, then laughed, a sound of pure joy that filled the room. My father would have loved you, she said, pulling him into an embrace. He always said humans were the most resourceful species in the galaxy. We have our moments, Leo agreed, holding her close. The next morning, they presented their solution to the council. Nera's face contorted with rage as Leo explained the provision in the family compact. This is absurd, she sputtered. That provision was never meant to be used. It was a personal indulgence of an old man, not a binding legal framework. Yet it remains part of our family bylaws, Shara countered smoothly. Bylaws you yourself have invoked in your attempt to remove me as administrator. Elder Toril, who had been listening intently, stroked his pale blue chin. The provision appears legitimate. If Administrator Vesh and Mr. Mercer undergo the formal bonding ceremony as described in the compact, then their attendance at the gathering as a bonded pair would indeed be consistent with our traditions. This makes a mockery of our customs, Nera protested. On the contrary, Idilio said, stepping forward. It honors your traditions by finding a path that respects both Australian culture and the reality of our relationship. Isn't adaptation itself a form of respect? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council chamber. Even some of Nera's supporters seemed swayed by the elegant solution. I move that we recognize the validity of the Vesh family compact provision, Elder Toril announced, and permit Administrator Vesh and Mr. Mercer to proceed with their bonding ceremony prior to the gathering. The motion passed with a clear majority, leaving Nera isolated and seething. As they left the chamber, Shara squeezed Leo's hand. You've done the impossible, she whispered. You've found a way to bridge our worlds without compromising either. The bonding ceremony took place 3 days later in the station's grand atrium. It was a blend of Australian tradition and human elements that Leo had requested, a symbolic representation of their union. Shara wore a gown of shimmering silver that caught the light as she moved, while Leo wore a formal suit modified with Australian design elements. The station's residents turned out in force to witness the historic event. Even those who had initially disapproved seemed moved by the obvious affection between the human and the Australian as they exchanged vows in both languages. With this bond, Shara said, placing a ceremonial band around Leo's wrist, I welcome you into my family, my home, and my heart. With this bond, Leo echoed, placing a matching band around her slender wrist, I pledge myself to you, to your family, and to our shared future. Elder Toril, officiating the ceremony, raised his hands. By the authority of the Station Council and in accordance with the Vesh Family Compact, I recognize this bond as valid and binding. Leo Mercer is now Leo Mercer Vesh, co-administrator of the Vesh family holdings and rightful partner to Shara Vesh. The atrium erupted in applause, all except for Nera, who watched from the periphery with cold fury before turning and stalking away. Later, in the privacy of what was now their shared quarters, Leo and Shara celebrated their union in the most intimate way possible, their physical connection a reflection of the deeper bond they had forged against all odds. "I never imagined," Shara murmured as they lay entwined afterward, "that being unable to pay your rent would lead to this." Leo laughed, tracing the elegant curve of her pointed ear. "Best financial crisis of my life." "You know," she said thoughtfully, "we never did settle that original debt, didn't we?" Leo raised an eyebrow. "I thought our arrangement covered it." Shara's lips curved in a playful smile. "Perhaps, but as your wife and landlord, I think I'm entitled to collect ongoing payments." "Is that so?" Leo pulled her closer, his body responding to the promise in her voice. "Well, I'd hate to fall behind again. How often did you have in mind?" "Frequently," she purred, her luminous eyes darkening with desire. "Very frequently." As they lost themselves in each other once more, Leo reflected on the strange path that had brought him here. From struggling tenant to co-administrator of the station's largest business, from lonely human expatriate to husband of the most fascinating woman he'd ever met. It wasn't the future he'd imagined when he'd first arrived on Astra 7, but as Shara had taught him, the most beautiful connections were often the ones you never saw coming.